now you'll see there's okay. So now you'll have three different workspaces that you can assign to the pipeline. Any existing workspace can be slotted into here as long as it's not already part of a different pipeline. So I'll show you like a pre-set up version of this just now. But yeah, that's more or less how you create it. That's how you assign a workspace to it. You just click assign, and now this workspace is part of the pipeline. You can do the setup in 10, 15 minutes, really. It's really, really quick. So just to the example that I've already set up, you'll see there's three different environments. You have your develop, test, or what I call QA, and then production. So first off, you'll see there's a little report in here, the data set as well as the report. And here's a green portion, which basically just means that there's a parity between a dev and test. So nothing needs to change, everything's good. But you'll see here in prod, what will happen is it says there's two new objects. It'll show you what is missing, or if you had another version of a file or deleted the reports and it's still in here, it would show you that it was deleted, which is quite useful. And yeah, so let me quickly just show you what it looks like. Let's quickly deploy from test to production. So this saves a lot of time because one, you don't have to go swap out your parameter strings manually, refresh the report, upload it. So that could save you like a good 10 minutes per report, depending on how big your data set is. But yeah, then next portion I just want to show out is that you have a sort of a git blame in the form of this deployment history. So on the initial part of the screen, you'll see an all section, which basically just shows you every single deployment that's happened on this pipeline between dev to test and test to production, with the name here being the target workspace. So if I actually go into one of these, you'll see there's like a couple of details here. So first, what stage it was deployed to, when it was deployed. So if something breaks, you have a good idea of when it happened. You could also check in your repo if you have one. Who it was deployed by. If you have something like a service account or a service principal, it would just be named here. So that might make things a bit if you don't have a Git repo. And then here under items, you'll see there's a couple of variations of how it could look. If there's a not equals, basically just means that the items were modified. There's a plus, obviously something was just added. Equals means that there was parity or that nothing changed if you deployed it. And then here you would also have an ID that you could copy if you need to send something to Microsoft. And if you do a deployment, you would have an option to give a bit of a note to give a reason why something was deployed. Just give a description in general, which is also quite nice. So then also backward deployments are a thing. So if I delete this report here, as well as this one, my apologies, and then click compare, what I can do is, oh, oops, easy. Sorry, just select this, deploy to previous stage. I have no idea why that bugged out. But yeah, then you can deploy backwards. So backward deployments automatically unmap your gateways that were used in this one. So let's say you deploy from prod backwards to QA, you don't have to worry about seeing prod data. It would automatically just kind of ruin the report. All of the logic would remain, all of the visuals would remain. You don't see any data though, which is quite nice. And yeah, that more or less covers that section. Then final portion is you can manage access to all of these environments separately. So for example, I could be an admin on this workspace, I could be a member or contributor on this one, or I could be a viewer, or I could not have access at all. It's quite nice. So only issue with that is that you need to have access to two adjacent workspaces in order to have this deployment feature activated. So if I don't have access to production, I will be able to use, oh yeah, I'll get to that just now, Anil, my bad. You'll be able to use this deploy section, but this will be grayed out for you. If you have access to QA and prod, you'll be able to use this. And also if you have access to the production environment, if you have an app, you can update from here. So I mentioned this earlier, but as we in the industry call this the lightning thingy or deployment rules, is used to change out your deployment settings. So this has two primary sections, which is the data sources rule, which is where you have that find this specific string, replace it with this. So for this report specifically, it won't work because I use a parameter. So it's detecting the current text. So what you would be able to do is if you have an actual string, you would be able to select an item from this dropdown, or if you want to change it entirely, you could change this to dots if that's your prod server string. Yeah, that's not ideal, but that could work. And any item that can be detected or any connection string that can be connected will appear in this dropdown. So you don't have to do anything extra to have that appear. So for support, we use parameter rules. So I set up a server parameter, and then here we just changed it out with SQL dev start. This is my company one, so I obviously won't be showing you this report. But if you do go into it, it's also not the end of the world. So yeah, then you just click save. And after that deployment rule is set up, there's a bit of a nuance to it. You would think a deployment rule would immediately have an effect on the report. That's not the case. It only has an effect after the next time that you actually deploy the report. So,
and when I am doing it for survival,
I have no idea what's going on.
Yes.
Anyway.
What are your end users versus unmuted?
Okay, good. No, that's fine. I was about to stress it sound like a radio. Anyway, so yeah, you can also deploy various sections of it. So let's say you only want to deploy a data set because that's the only thing I changed. You can deploy that like this, or you could just deploy the report outright. Let's say you just made a visual change. There's no reason to override the data set. That's just unnecessary. So you would just deploy this visual aspect. But that more or less wraps up this demo for the practical demonstration. I'll quickly run back to presenting just the finale. Oh, missed that slide. My bad.
Cool. Thank you so much, Christiaan. That was an awesome demo. Yeah, just in conclusion, yeah, so we had a couple of thoughts, and you would have probably heard a couple of things as well. But overall, we're happy that the reporting world finally has some sort of CI/CD. That just makes our lives a lot easier, and it's just so much easier to develop and deploy and test. And I think that works really nice. Proper version control is lacking, as you would have heard. The OneDrive solution is sketchy at best. We really hope and pray that Power BI comes up with something solid in the future.
Yeah, and then just to kind of wrap up, backward deployments, honestly, I feel like it could have been better. Why would you need to unassign a workspace or completely, scrap it in order to do a small backwards deployment? Doesn't make sense, but it is what it is. Deployment history and tracking of changes is actually quite nice since you can track back when something broke or, when something happened. So that's also quite cool. And in general, although I did hammer quite a lot on the cons, I'm very much for using this feature. It saves so much time, honestly. Initially, when my admin and I started, so a deployment admin, it took us an hour to do some deployments because let's say you had 6. You would have to swap out the parameters, change connection strings, refresh the report, which could take like 10 to 20 minutes depending on the report, then publish it. And that's just unnecessary. So now, just quick setup on the pipeline, push it through the pipeline, refresh, done. So it makes your job a lot quicker. And there's a couple of nuances, but in general, it's a really good feature, and overall, it will get better as time goes on.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate the time, and yeah, hope you enjoyed. Cool. Any questions from the audience?
Before we take questions, just yeah, thanks to Anil and Christiaan. Yeah, any questions?
So I have one, well, I have a few on my side, but I won't hold you guys up too long. The first one I want to understand is, have you tested it using, for instance, if you've got a deployment pipeline and then you've updated the report using an XMLA endpoint? I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that. I want to know if you still can use deployment pipelines, because once you've updated a report using XMLA endpoints, you can never download the report again.
Yeah, I had the privilege of finding that out the hard way. Yeah, the XMLA endpoint, I think what it does is it breaks it up, as far as I know, and then you can't download the file, as you correctly said, but I think it still works in the deployment pipeline. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I found that out the hard way. So as much as the XMLA endpoint is awesome, yeah, just downloading your file again, yeah. But as far as I know, it does work in the deployment pipeline.
So yeah, I believe you had some other questions. Welcome.
If no one else is willing, then yeah, I mean, I'd like 10 more if you don't mind. I'm kidding, I'll keep it down to 2. The one other thing is when you're creating the deployment pipelines for each stage, does my Power BI file need to have a parameter for all the environments that I could switch to? So like if deployment, let's say test has got a different database, different server, and then my QA, different database, different server, then my production, different database, different server. Do I have to have all those parameters in the one Power BI file?
No. So what you would need to do is you have a parameter for server and database, respectively, and then you just set that on, between the dev and QA phase. You would have a setting where you can say, okay, this is the parameter for server, for example, and this is the parameter for database. So you would have 2 parameters, and then you just set it between each phase of the pipeline. So there's no need to have, this is the dev string, this is the QA string, that kind of thing.
Did you have another question? You said 2 more, so that is 1 down.
Well, yeah, let's take one. Is there any question here from the in-person audience or the remote audience? I do have a quick comment to make. I've personally worked a lot with the OneDrive version control, and yes, it is sketchy, but it's better than having nothing. And when you check in, there is like a check-in message, which works like a commit message, basically. Yeah.
I'm just on that. Oh, that's loud. You only have the commit message when you're using SharePoint or something.
That's correct, yeah.
If you're using OneDrive, you don't have a commit message.
Yeah.
Even though they are the same thing, more or less.
That's correct.
All right, the one last question that I had was, when you were showing the rules that you can set for the deployment rules, can you enforce the comment before deploying?
As far as I know, the comment is optional. I haven't come across a way to set the comment specifically, so I'll have to check in on this and well, I don't really have your contact details, so I wouldn't be able to let you know. But yeah, I'm thinking that at the moment there isn't a way, because I can pretty easily deploy without doing anything, and I haven't seen anything on the gateways, or not the gateways, sorry, deployment pipeline settings. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the many Microsoft things. But it would be nice to enforce notes. So, I mean, just like Git, you can't make an empty commit message. Like, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, 100%.
And then just another comment here from me, a tip to consider for everyone from, if you think about CI/CD, on the CI, the continuous integration side, something that I read on a blog by Paul Turley, he's an MVP in the BI space. When you create a new Teams team, okay, Microsoft Teams team, it actually automatically creates a Power BI workspace for you. I believe it was either automatically created and there was no way to switch it off, and they've switched that off a while ago, that it's not automatically created. But anyways, you can create a workspace that's directly linked to that Teams team. So basically the SharePoint drive on that Teams team will be linked to the Power BI workspace. So then when you have that workspace, you import your data set from the Teams SharePoint drive. So then whenever you've worked on a massive data set of, let's say, 200 or 500 megabytes, you don't need to publish. You literally save the file, and it's automatically synced with your in this case, dev, your development workspace. So yeah, that also saves some time, and then you don't need to worry about checking in or things like that. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions, or like I said, disagreements? Okay. Once again, thank you. Okay, and now, sorry, I actually need to look at the agenda. Yeah, we're going to do a community discussion on Datamarts in the Power BI service. And if only I had a different hat here, I would put it on now and ask who didn't do their homework. No. So Stefan actually sent out some content, like in terms of Microsoft documentation about Datamarts and even getting started Datamart, if you had a chance to look at it. But then also there could be some people who do have experience with Datamarts. So basically we're going to talk about Datamarts, explore the whole topic, and that also means, you know, if there's a question to be answered, let's Google it now, see what that is, and basically we use this as a time to learn together about some feature of Power BI that we don't necessarily know that well. And especially when it comes to Datamarts, I believe it's still in a preview stage, so it's not in general availability yet. So it is something good to explore. Okay, so yeah, Sven has prepared something for us to engage with, but this is now where we are basically asking everyone to yeah, almost unmute themselves and join in this discussion. Thank you. Sven, over to you.
All right. Is this microphone, am I close enough to the microphone? Can you guys hear me? Well, online people, hopefully you can hear me. Hello to everyone in person behind me. Hello, thanks for that presentation, guys. Yeah, so obviously this is our first collaboration session. We're going to, if it works, we're going to continue it every odd month. So the next one will be in May. The topic in this case is Datamarts. It is preview. It is also it is in preview, but it is also premium, so bear that in mind. In this case, I've just put one or two slides together with some definitions to get us started, and then I'd like to ask everyone if they've got questions, if they've got comments, if they've used it before and they love it or hate it, because actually we'd like to try and learn from each other, and that's what this whole collab session is about. So just to get us started, in case some of you haven't come across a Datamart yet, what I actually didn't even put on here is that actually a Datamart is a baby data warehouse. Okay, so many of us have heard data warehouse as a term that's been around for a long time, but a Datamart is typically a smaller version of that, normally for one entity, you know, like for the finance people or the supply chain people, whereas a data warehouse might be many Datamarts, meaning the collective of those many Datamarts.
So would that mean a Datamart would always be filtered on, you know, one or more attributes of the bigger data warehouse?
So you might explicitly filter it, but in this case, it's almost, in fact, if you read this piece, the first paragraph, it says there, self-service users to securely collect, store, analyze, and share their data in a unified low-code solution through a unified analytics. I thought in there the definition was it's for specific, actually specific groups or subgroups in your organization. So it's meant for big companies, okay? And it's in, try and picture a bank. Now the bank has got all these BI people around there, but you're the boss of this particular department and you need some reports, but now the bank is, you know, you've got to get in the queue and other people are developing, but you 3 months down the line, they're trying to empower you that in your branch, in your area, in your sector, you can get some self-service functionality together, rather than just saying, well, there's one person over there doing his stuff and another person doing her stuff. You're actually trying to use some of this wording here, unify, securely collect, store, analyze, okay, in a unified manner. All right. So you're actually, as a department, you're doing it. Okay, so when I was trying to answer your question about filtering, you may well actually take a whole data warehouse and then filter it down to the finance team only. But in this case, it's probably more the other way around that says this is the finance team's data only, as opposed to the subset of the main one.
And would we say, okay, let me ask, are you familiar with the term data mesh?
No.
Okay, so it's something that's on the Gartner Hype Cycle for data management, but they say that it's already obsolete. But it's basically, the reason why they say it's obsolete is because it was moving towards the space where we actually came from, where every user has their own little Excel spreadsheet that's telling a different version of the truth. So is this trying to prevent that?
Exactly.
Or could it potentially create a similar scenario?
No, it's meant to prevent that, although
Okay.
it is siloed. So it's the finance team only, or it's the Gauteng branch only. You know, a data mart is meant to be a smaller version of the data warehouse. Okay?
I see. Okay.
But
It's a localized. Basically, you're going down from the big database, going subset for this department of this, and that's really what it is. You're not changing each one has got his own database.
Yes.
It
yes.
you're still reading from the source
I see.
and bring it into the.
Okay.
when I get to the next slide, you'll see some URLs, including the Microsoft Learn documentation, which is it's a really good article to read. And then there's the January update and the February update articles, which also talk about some of the new stuff. And in there, they say, typically what happens in a department or a division, you've got some SharePoint files, you've got some Excel files. In fact, maybe you've even got some guy who's got some Access database stuff going on there. This is meant to stop all of that and put it all in one central place for the entire team to use. Okay, that's what it's meant to be. That's the whole unified piece. Okay, so then also some more terminology. Datamarts, user-based data warehousing and SQL access to your data. Okay, we're going to talk about the SQL access soon. Then there's another terminology, data flows, okay? Reusable data prep, meaning your ETL, and that can be used for data sets and data marts, okay? And then data sets, which is the metric and the semantic layer of your BI reporting, meaning the relationships, the measures, and so on. So you've got data marts, you've got data flows and data sets, and you've got to try and keep all of those things clear in your mind as to which is which, okay? And what makes it more complicated is the fine print below there where I've said, in some cases they overlap. So in a data mart, if you want to connect to data, you use a data flow. Okay, now a data flow, for those who don't know, is a Power Query in the cloud. Okay, so Power Query normally lives in your Power BI desktop file, but a data flow is that same principle, but centralized in the cloud so that other people can use that ETL environment that you created. And so that same thing, the data flow is the method that you get the data into your data mart. So there's an overlap. And then as we'll see soon, a data flow automatically creates a data set so that you can analyze in Power BI. Sorry, what did I say? Sorry, wrong. The data mart automatically creates a data set so that you can do Power BI reporting off of the data mart. So you can see they are similar but overlapping and different type of concepts.
Another question here. So what is a data mart physically? In terms of, is it a data set disguised as something else? Is it a SQL database?
Okay, all right. So it's probably all of the above because it has to have a data flow to get data in. So it's a data flow, okay? It's the data mart for me, and the way I like data marts only for the storage part, which is part of the conversation we're going to get to. It can do other things, but I don't like those other things. I like it for the storage part. So it's actually an Azure SQL database. Azure SQL storage location up to 100 gigs. So it's not insignificant. It's a lot, and that's what we use it for. Okay, we as in our company. So it's the data flows, the ETL. It's the data storage part, and it is also a data model. You can create the relationships. You can create the measures in there, but it's slow and cumbersome, which is why we don't like them. Okay, but as soon as you've completed that, then others can connect to your data mart. And in actual fact, it's the data set linked to the data mart that they connect to build the Power BI report. So it's all of the above, basically. Yeah, that's what it, yeah. All right, so you can Google all this stuff. You actually don't even need to, you know, copy and paste it or whatever. The point is, it's if you go to the Learn platform and you just type in Datamarts, it'll take you right there. So good stuff. The January feature, the February feature updates, worthwhile looking at those. And basically then, this is now the group discussion. So that you know, I do have a Datamart that I set up so that if we need to test and look, we can do that. I've got one connected to Power BI and connected to Excel, so I can show you that if you need. But this is the part where either the guys, people in this room or online, please, if you can just unmute yourselves and say, you know, have you used it? Let me get some of the topics started, okay, and add your topics.
Well, let's get everyone to put up their hand on Zoom. Raise your hand if you've used a Datamart yet, and then in the room here, we'll get everyone to put their hand up physically. So I'll check Zoom now. Let me first check in the room. Who has used Datamarts in the room? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Okay. And then let's see on the call. It's Michael, Janine. Okay, and then assuming that's everyone, okay, maybe let me say, if you haven't found the raise hand option yet, there's a reactions button at the bottom of Zoom. And then there you can, oh, is that the one? Has it moved? Yeah, you click on reactions and then there's raise hand. Okay. Okay, but Janine says it's definitely not ready yet.
That has been our experience.
Okay. Janine, can we hear from you? What has been your experience?
So maybe it's come a long way since I last used it. Sorry, just switching on my video here. But yeah, when I used it last year, it was really, really frustrating. We would set up a Datamart, and then the following day you try to go into the Datamart, and all of a sudden you can't log in. It's throwing all these error messages, and then you delete the Datamart and you spin up a whole new one, and then a week later you get the same thing. So it was just so frustrating. Like, and then I figured, somebody said to me there's some tweak you just needed to do to get past that error, but I never figured that out in the time that I was using it. So it's just, yeah, no,
My
it's
colleague
not
Keegan, who was going to be here this evening, he had exactly the same thing, although his comment was also the same as Janine. That was last year. So we did try this almost as soon as it came out. So September, October, November last year, we were trying it out. Our client wanted a data warehouse. We realized they were way too small to have a data warehouse. They actually didn't need it. They just thought they needed it. So we said, no worries. There's this wonderful thing called a Datamart. It's a baby version. Okay. And then what Keegan was experiencing is what Janine is. He would connect to his data, the ETL, the data flows thing. He would do a few things, and then it would say something. I'm going to get the exact wording. It said, your Datamart is in a failed state. Okay, a failed state. So he's like, oh, bother, this is not good. So he started again. He literally started all over again. Then it would work fine, and then a couple of days later, failed state again. And you do that a few times, and then you pull the plug. Now maybe it's fine now. In fact, that was I was actually hoping to hear today. Someone who's tried it this year and said, actually, it's much better. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, let's hear from Anil.
Hi, me again. So I did give a BI Flash talk on this, and Janine, the workaround for what you mentioned was to, I think, go to the settings, fiddle with the connection string or the connection setting, and then go back into the data mart, and then essentially it would reset. Yeah, that's just one example of a workaround that seems just so unnecessary. But honestly, my experience with data marts was mixed as well. I like the many options for connecting. So, connecting as if it was a Power BI data set, or connecting via the SQL endpoint, which allows you to connect to other data sources in your Power BI file. I like the idea of the visual query. So people that aren't familiar with code, the no-code solution, I think that works nicely. But I mean, it will get the job done. The look and feel of Power BI Desktop with Datamarts was pretty neat. Row level security was really cool as well. Yeah, and there were some neat stats. If you're familiar with data flows, it gives you some stats of running. The weird things were, like collaboration was just like almost problematic. The data source issues that Janine mentioned, like, and the workaround. Row level security didn't apply immediately from what I remembered. And then the worst one is if your query works in the preview but breaks on the full load, you have to start again. So I thought that was just insane. Sometimes the Power BI desktop queries don't necessarily translate into Datamarts. It's also very fussy about data types. But I mean, if you're familiar with SSIS, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Personally, on a project, we used it to connect to an ODBC source. That seemed to be quite problematic. And sometimes the prompts and navigation were unintuitive at times. I didn't quite understand like the flow of it. Like, you thought you clicked here, but or the button would be there, and yeah, it led somewhere else. But yeah, overall, it was a mixed bag of feelings. Definitely, as Janine mentioned, the frustration. Yeah, definitely.
When last did you use it?
This must have been probably around November, December. So I hope.
We're all roughly, 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
Okay. What I did while you were chatting, I just put on, in case anyone not seen it. So this is a Datamart. It's got this little black icon, this little house, little thingy there. So the Datamart, like I mentioned, to get data, if I click on get data, you'll see that the data flow window environment, effectively the Power Query in the cloud. Okay, and you can copy your Power BI desktop queries and put them in here without having to redo them. That's quite nice. In this case, literally on the Learn platform for Datamarts, there are some available data sources of data that you can use. I just found one of them from that list and connected to it. It took me a couple of seconds, and so now I've got categories, I've got customers, I've got employees, I've got invoices, that kind of story. Okay. Obviously, just sample data sets, and then under the modeling section, it's all very small. I found this a little bit unintuitive. So basically, 1 or 2 tables didn't have relationships. Some of them did the auto relationship, and they did it correctly because it's a structured database in the background. But it didn't do it against my invoices table, so I had to create a relationship. And I'm used to Power BI Desktop. It's quite easy. You drag and drop, or you go manage relationships and whatever. But I just felt a little bit awkward here. And the answer is the only way I could find to do it is literally drag and drop. There is no button to push or open up a window that helps you connect and do it. You literally have to go to that field there, drag it onto that field there, and let go. Okay, which you can do in Power BI Desktop, but it's now that you know it, then you can do it.
So something I notice here is, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can actually create multiple relationships between tables, whereas in Power BI Desktop, you can only have one active relationship at a time. So
did you notice that? I don't think so. Maybe it looks like it. No. Okay, yeah. No. I would be surprised. But yeah, look, at one point I did make it all pretty. And then when I came back again, it went back to the spaghetti.
Yeah, sorry. Power BI Desktop actually draws the lines around.
Okay,
so that's
so this is going straight through them. Yeah. Okay.
I do have a question now that you can do this in the Power BI service. Assuming you're willing to work with a lot of frustration and you don't have deadlines, does this now mean that you no longer need Power BI Desktop? That you can do everything in the Power BI service? Because I feel like this was one of the last components.
Yeah. I still would never do that. That's why I don't like the Datamart story. So why would I go slowly and create measures in here when the real answer is you use Power BI Desktop, you create your data model, you publish that as your master model, and then you connect to that as a data set. To me, that's the best thing in the world. It's easy, it's quick. The same principles apply. You've got a centralized model that everyone is connecting to, and it's much faster. Whereas to do it here in the Datamart, the same principle applies. You can create the measure and you can create the relationships and do all of that. It's just slower, it's more cumbersome, but yeah, it also actually auto saves all the time, which is, I suppose, a good thing. But what happens there is, sometimes you actually don't want to save it, and so it's doing all of that stuff. So anyway, the long and the short of it is, me personally, I won't use this for the data modeling capability, but I do like it for the data storage capability. So the 100 gigs thing to me is cool, okay? If it is that your client has data and they want to centralize it somewhere and they don't have a server and they this and that and whatever, then just hook it up to this. Okay, yes, it is premium. And then you can store it there, and it's not just a small little thing. 100 gigs is significant. And then use that as the connection. So to do that, when you are in Power BI Desktop, okay, this is connecting to the data set. Sorry, I need to tell you two things, but so that you don't sort of get confused. If I come out of this, okay, you will see there's the PUG data mart, and automatically the data set was created, okay? So I didn't create that, it did it for me, all right? And every time I finish if I add a new measure in the data mart, it will automatically go into that data set within a few seconds. So when I'm in Power BI Desktop, and I go and connect, okay, Dataverse, I can't remember, Dataverse must be, yeah. Oh, okay, so I can't do it now because I've already done it, but effectively you literally point to it, the data set that was created by the data mart, and then you connect to it, and all the measures are in there. Okay. Yes, question?
So in that sense, you sort of have your story with the data mart, and then in that case you can sort of access.
So just hit the yeah.
So in the sense, like you will have your central data, right? The data mart, right? And then now, since it generates data sets for you in that sense, you just use them as your connection strings in that sense.
So I haven't got there yet, but you're quite right. That's the two parts that I wanted to mention, except I'm still on the first one. So I'm glad you raised that. So obviously you can connect to the data mart as a data set with the measures and the relationships in it, which I don't like because it's slow to create the measures in the data mart. So instead, what I prefer, which I can't actually do from this one unless I go with a new file. Well, I don't want to do the composite model story. You connect to the SQL endpoint of the data mart, effectively then making the data mart nothing else other than a storage environment. Yeah, and that's the thing that I think we would probably use. So I've just opened up a new Power BI Desktop file. Okay, so get data, Dataverse. Oh, sorry, not Dataverse. I meant sorry, cancel that.
Can I ask something? Just to understand, I didn't work with Datamart because I work with desktop.
Yeah.
Is Datamart, you do all the measure there, or only basically storage with the ETL?
It's got the ETL, the power data flows. It's got the measures. It's just slow to create them. You're doing it in the cloud environment.
But why do you need the measure there?
Well, that's the whole point. So they're trying to make you put them there, but I don't think it's fast enough, and it's too slow and frustrating. So that's why I would never do it. But the answer is you can put the measures there and the relationships there.
And I suppose
measure is while you're in operation, basically you're selecting different things.
Yeah.
You do that operation. You need it there in the Power BI. While in the data mart, basically that's what I understood is storage.
Yeah.
Am I right, wrong?
Well, you're half right, and it's storage plus data modeling if you want to use the data modeling.
The ETL, yeah.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, because it seems a lot of us have had the same experience, I guess, last year, just coming into this thing and we're like, it's not working. Look, I'll try and advocate for why you should use it in the way that most people don't really have a good experience with. And the one is, I said this to Sven when I was still reading the documentation, and I was like, this is going to be a game changer. it was a game changer, mainly for the wrong reasons, but I still think it's going to improve. The reason you'd want to have something like this is we use a method, for instance, called like a thin file, and you'll have a main model file. The main model file is still in Power BI. It has your relationships, it has your measures, it has your ETL process. You publish it with no visuals. Then you have a file that just connects to that file in the Power BI service where you drag and drop your visuals. It's now basically self-service. You drag your measures. That's, I think, where they were going with this, and they didn't get it quite right because they tried to do too many things. The data storage part of it works perfectly. The other parts of it, which is the modeling, the measure building, they still have some kinks to work out. But I do think if they get that piece component right, it would replace if you have something like, for instance, SSIS running your ETLs, SSAS running your models. Those are two separate environments that you could basically now merge into this one place, which is your SSIS, SSAS, and all you need to do now is drag and drop on any file, whether it's Excel, Power BI, you now have an entire model that you can plug and play. So I think if they can get that right, it will be superb.
And Microsoft is notorious for bringing something out before it's ready and then making improvements each week and each month and whatever, getting feedback, and then suddenly saying 6 or 12 months later, it's ready. Okay.
Well, we saw that with Bing just now when they integrated ChatGPT and the mess they created.
Yeah, no, true.
Yeah, use your mic.
Okay, so on the screen here, I went through the data hub, and there are all the Datamarts, but the key here, and it's obviously sometimes, and if you're not really looking for it, it's a bit hard to find it. So there I clicked on a Datamart, and instead of saying automatically connect, I click on the drop down and I connect to the SQL endpoint. That means I'm connecting to the Azure SQL storage of the Datamart, not the data set related to the Datamart. Okay. And this is what I think is the good way of doing it. Okay. And then obviously you've got to authenticate and do all of that stuff. Okay. But okay, so that's not a cool thing. Yeah. So I mean, Anil, you did mention something which I initially was a bit puzzled by. Let me just try and find the right window to get to. Where do I need to go? There. And I need to go there. So this whole thing about these queries. Okay, so there's the data. There's the data tab where you can see what's in the tables. Okay, and there's the model tab. You can see all the relationships. Okay, then there's this thing called query, and I'm like, what must I do here? I mean, it's got quite a nice little visual story. So if I go, let's just go employees, and I think I drag employees here, and maybe I mustn't. Okay, yeah, so I've got employees, and now I can do some Power Query type things. I can choose columns, remove columns, whatever, and it's got a little visual. I can reduce the number of rows by filtering on something. And well, let me do one or two things so that we can at least.
It looks like it's basically just visualized what you normally had on the right-hand pane anyways.
Yes. So okay. It's a more graphical interface, but actually, so I thought, well, that's quite nice, but actually that's the end. It just creates, once I'm finished, that's my query, and this is my end result, and I can't do anything else with it. I can go and say, I can export it to Excel, and it literally is a list. It's a list, it is literally this table. That's all I can do with it. Or I can visualize my results where it's going to go and create a little Power BI report for me. So I think what it is for the data engineer to get a feel for the data. They can now drag and drop a few things to try and create something with the data to try and understand more about it. But genuinely, I can't see the need for it. I did see in the February release notes, they said coming soon is the ability to connect Power BI to one of these visual queries, and then maybe that becomes more important.
I was actually thinking that query step, isn't that something like, for instance, and I don't know why they would do it this way if that's the case, but in Power BI, you can have sub-steps that can be used multiple times. So you could create a step that does a certain transformation, and that bit of transformation can be referenced in other queries. I thought maybe that's why that does.
Yeah, I don't think so. I literally think it's to get familiar with the data. Although, is there a question? Point, yeah.
So I think it might be for customers if they, for some reason, have access, because it has, access control, row level security, right? That limits their data. And if they can't find something on your report, they could maybe build like a small query there because it looks like it's visually driven.
Yes.
And then they can just get a quick little dump of the data that they need. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because that would also make sense. But I don't know, I've kind of been burned by preview features, so
Yeah.
I will not use this in my environment. Last time I tried this was 2 years back, or not Datamarts, but a preview feature. And our environment kind of went into Armageddon at random stages. So your environment would be fine, random failure, and then all of a sudden, like 50% of your reports go offline, and you would not be able to fix it. So I don't trust preview features anymore.
Less than ideal, that's for sure. Okay. All right. But anyway, so in this visualize your results, it literally has my employees table and the 1 or 2 transformations that I had done. And that's my output. So I can drag some stuff on here, but I don't know. No, not so excited about that. Yeah. Anyway, but I think we're also actually over time now. But I think we've covered that. I would love it if you know, maybe the extended homework is for us to do it. Actually, those who've tried it before, you know, like a couple of months ago, try it again, and then we'll just sort of give a quick catch up again the next time we meet, something like that.
Yeah, well, that is in 2 months from now, and a lot can change in the Power BI space in 2 months. So maybe some of these frustrations get fixed. Just before we wrap up, and I know we are quite over time, I just want to get some feedback from Michael, who also said that he's worked with Datamarts before. Just you know, if there's anything that we've missed or didn't mention here. Michael, if you're there.
Yeah, no, I don't use them much, but what is nice is that you can use that SQL endpoint. So you can use other tools, Management Studio, for example. So if you need to actually suck data out of what is a data flow into something else, that is a way that you can do like sort of data exports. You know, trivial example, I'm not saying you should do it, but if you have to build a, you know, use Data Factory, right? You could then use Data Factory to then suck data out of it and then push it into something else. But I don't, yeah, it's not, most of them fail, so I've stopped using them.
Yeah.
Just the prize.
Oh, yes. And then the last thing, okay, well, thank you just for everyone who contributed to this community discussion. Personally, I think it went well. We'll ask again next time, but we'd like to do more of this in future. So just before we end the call, last thing to do is just awarding the Enterprise DNA Prize. So Sven, do you have a question ready?
I decided actually I'm going to do it slightly differently this time. And I was quiet about the rules just to, you know, just to make it spontaneous. I'd like to say that the person who was the most participative in this Datamarts collaboration would get the prize, assuming he or she had not won the prize before. Okay, so Michael, Anil, Janine, they've all commented. So I think the chap in the back there with the colored shirt, yeah, you contributed. I'm happy to give it to that chap there. I'll tell you more about it. So we're just going to make sure that, just as a reminder, it's a voucher worth $500 for video training from Enterprise DNA. But they do want you to be active in the program, which means you've got to regularly log in and use the content and so on. I thought if the person who won the prize felt that they were not going to use it, they could then choose who they wanted to share it, to give it to. So that would be an option for you if you would like it. Yeah.
To be honest, I would like to, is there anyone who's interested in the prize?
Yeah. A lot of people have already won the prize, so yeah. So you're saying you're declining it?
I'm not sure if I'll have the capacity to use it, to be honest. But
any of the gents around you there?
Oh,
okay.
Are you guys interested?
Oh, okay, right. In which case, so you've said thank you, but no thank you. It's
yeah.
Cool?
So the thing is, I just want to be honest.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that I won't have that much capacity to sort of,
Right.
because it's an investment that I have to sort of.
Yeah. No, well, that's very conscientious of you. Thank you for that. In which case, is it
Okay.
who was it there? Manendra. Okay, I've just put my email address. I'm going to put my email address into the chat, and then you can just contact me, please, and I will hook you up with Enterprise DNA. Okay.
Okay, well then that's it. And thanks again to our speakers and everyone else who contributed to today. Can I get a round of applause and then we'll say goodbye. Thank you. Okay, cheers everyone on the call. We'll be enjoying some pizzas here. Hope to see you in person next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for the session, guys. Cheers.